You're listening to Widowed AF with
Rosie Gilmoss
and Lucinda Boast.
We've invited some members of the world's most exclusive club to bravely share their stories.
Join us for some honest conversations about living a different life, the crushing lows, the surprising highs, and everything in between.
Please note this is a podcast about death. Carefully read the episode descriptions and be kind to yourself.
But for now, welcome to our podcast.
Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You've got Rosie here today and I have a guest joining me. I've got Nicky Outlaw, who probably has the coolest surname I've had on so far. Hello, Nicky.
Hiya.
Thank you ever so much for joining us today. And Nicky and I have a friend in common and we actually live very close together, isn't that? Talk about small world, hey?
It's a very small world.
So, well, Kent seems to be particularly, I have to say, I'm not from Kent. Everyone seems to know each other around here. So, Nicky, your husband of 32 years was killed in a motorbike accident in 2019. You know this, but obviously our listeners don't. So, that in itself is a catastrophic loss. You then had another complication to deal with. I'm going to let you tell your story in your own words, if you wouldn't mind. So, Nicky, please tell us what brought you into this club.
Yeah, so on 6th of May 2019, Mike set off on his motorbike ride, as he normally does, on a beautiful, bright, sunny bank holiday Monday. I was having a lazy day, looked to check my phone, and find my phone, saw that he was at Tunbridge. I thought, he's had a good ride out and he's on his way home. Probably about half an hour later, the knock on the door came from the police. And I can remember their words. They said, "Is your husband Michael Outlaw?" I went, "Yes." He said, "Was he riding a bike?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know the registration number?" I couldn't remember the registration number, but I knew it was a Yamaha MT-09. And they said, "It's okay, he's alive, but he's been flown to King's College Hospital and we're here to take you to the hospital." That, I think, is when the shock set in. I've got 2 dogs and I had to think, where am I going to do it? I chucked my keys with my neighbour, got in the back of the police car, and then they said, "By the way, we're going up on Blues and Twos." Then it's serious. Get into the hospital waiting room, the relatives' room, with the 2 police women who took me up. They were very conscious that they got to me before social media. I saw the incident on social media and put 2 and 2 together.
You don't think about this, do you? The fact that I guess motorbike and car accidents are now all over social media, often presumably before relatives have been informed. Forgive me, but I hadn't even thought about that.
No, and it was it was the May Day run, which is the annual run from Orpington down to Hastings. It shut the A21 for 4.5 hours. It was all over the local press, Facebook, everything. Wherever you looked, it was there, to the point that, it even hit the national papers, so the Mail, etc. And the last photo that I have of Mike is of him lying in the road being treated by the paramedics, which was splashed all over the front page of the Daily Mail and Kent Online.
Oh, God, that's awful. Oh, my goodness. I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you do the normal thing. You sit in the relatives' room. The doctor came in to say he had multiple bleeds on the brain, which were inoperable. They were just putting chest drains in and stabilising him. And once they put the chest drains in, I could go in and see him. That seemed to last forever, absolute forever. And then they finally came through and said I could go and see him in resus. And I was with him 2-3 minutes, I can't remember. And then the police surgeon came in to take, because it was a road traffic accident, they take bloods for toxicology. So at that point, I went out the room again and headed up. The next thing was he headed up to critical care. And again, I was ushered into the relatives' room and then the alarm went off. And everybody in the relatives' room was sort of looking and saying, "Who's that? Who's that?" And after a while I said, "Is that the new person who's just been brought up?" And they went, "Yes." So I didn't know what was happening. And it was a while later before they let me in to see him again. I didn't know at the time, but his heart had stopped again, but they had resuscitated him. Long story short, he was in a coma. He didn't regain consciousness. And 10 days later, I had to make the decision to turn his life support off, which is probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make.
I can hear in your voice.
Yeah. our mutual friend Andy, bless his cotton socks, he texted my dad on that day and he said, there's absolutely no way that you're travelling home on the train. And he came up with his people carrier and sat outside the hospital until such time as we were ready and drove us home. And I'll be forever grateful for him for that.
It's those acts of kindness, isn't it? I mean, it's a relatively big thing actually to sit up in a car outside a hospital for the day, but
Yeah.
It's not, those things matter. They matter. Just having a friendly face waiting for you instead of having to stumble out of doing something like that and then get onto the train.
Yeah.
Who was with you, Nicky? Who was with you?
So my dad was with me. Mike's first apprentice, Stuart, he came up. The guy he was riding with and his wife were there, and he's a real close friend of him, Dave, was there as well. He was surrounded by love and friendship at the time. Yeah, and he slipped away really, really quickly. I think the thing that has haunted me is the fact that when the doctor sat me down to talk about sort of the next steps, they actually gave me two options. They said that we could switch life support off and let him go, or we could put him through an operation, fit a tracheotomy and see what happened. In a way, I wish they'd just given me the one option, because you have that lingering doubt. But a few weeks ago, I went to see a tarot card reader in West Malling. You know, when you're on your own, making life-changing decisions is difficult. You want to know that you're on the right path. You've got nobody to bounce your ideas off of. And she was a spiritualist as well. The cards came out and they were really good and they were really positive. But she said, we got onto the subject of, because a lot of the cards were surrounded by butterflies. The day I switched Mike's life support off, I was sitting outside King's College Hospital, concrete metropolis, and this little blue butterfly came down and landed on my wrist and then flew away again. So all the cards that turned up were surrounded by butterflies. And she said, you know, is there significance in that? And I said, yes, I lost my husband in a bike accident. And he came through. And what she told me, nobody knows. He said, you know, he tried to avoid the accident, but it was the slide down the road that killed him, or that caused the injury. And it was the slide down the road, and it looks like the bike hit his head on the way through. So that actually gave me closure to that. Did I make the right decision? Yes, I did.
I mean, all I'm hearing here is what an enormous responsibility to put on you.
Yeah.
You know, somebody with no medical knowledge, presumably, who, in a time of enormous emotional stress and trauma, is being asked to make literally a life and decision. And I think that's an enormous weight to place upon somebody. And I'm very sorry that you were put in that position. I imagine that there were reasons, and I don't mean to imply that I'm criticising the staff, but it feels like another heavy bag to carry.
Yeah. And, you know, I was fully aware that because of the circumstances of the accident and everything else, there would be an inquest. There would be, you know, the coroner would be involved. I was in close contact with the police investigating officer. And I must admit, the police were absolutely marvellous. They were brilliant with me. The day after, we let him go on the 16th of May at 7 p.m. in the afternoon. I rang the police the following day, and they immediately, you know, appointed a family liaison officer who made an appointment to come round and see me. And then, you know, you end up on this treadmill almost. And she took me through the process. She was there to support me right up to the point of inquest. The police were carrying on their investigation. Mike's bloods had to go to, the coroner had to release Mike's bloods for toxicology as part of the standard procedure. And I can recall saying to her at the time, you know, it's not, I'm absolutely fine with that because he didn't have vodka on his cornflakes. It was just a sort of a joke, bit of sense of humour.
A formality.
Yeah. The bit that shocked me though was that she said, what I need you to do is to write a life statement and a press release. She said at the point in time that the coroner will release Mike's body, it will go to inquest where they will open and adjourn the case. She said at that point in time, the reporters will be in the inquest, and that's when the name and address and everything else is released. And she said, you know, with social media nowadays, what these journalists tend to do, if we don't release the press statement and the photo that you want to be released, they will then trawl through social media and make their own story up.
Yep. I was given a piece of advice actually when they asked for a photo of them when he was missing, because they said this is going to get picked up.
Yeah.
You need to have control over the narrative. I wasn't asked to do a press statement, but I did work with a journalist in the end to get them off my back. But yeah, I can feel that sort of the way it's all coming in at you. I can remember that myself.
Yeah. And I think it's good in a way, because you then go and in that real time of grief or initial grief shock, you're going through some of the happier memories. And at that point in time, it was probably a very good process to go through. And she said, because of the media coverage that Mike's accident got on the day, there was a possibility that I could be contacted by journalists. And the day that the coroner released Mike's body back to me, within 2 hours, I had knocks on the door by journalists, even though we had a press statement.
Now, Nicky, there was an additional complication to come, wasn't there? When they took his blood, can you tell us what they found in it? And I mean, I know because I've spoken to you previously, but I mean, listeners, this is just blow your minds.
Yeah. So 27th of July 2019, the investigating officer from the police arranged for me to go into the police station to take me through the results of their investigation. And the reason they do that is to give me some closure, to let me know what they found out about the circumstances of the accident, so at least I can piece it together. So I had an appointment 5:30 on that afternoon. Got in there. My dad accompanied me. Tim, who was riding with Mike, and another good friend, Rob, came with me as well. Jim and my family liaison officer said, "Oh, could we have a quick word with you beforehand while the others are signing in?" And they took me into the interview room and they sat me down and they said, "We've had Mike's toxicology results back." And they said, "He's tested positive for cocaine and he's 3 times over the legal limit." My world just fell apart, absolutely fell apart. I know Mike, and everybody I spoke to just said, absolutely no way is that true.
Was going to be my next question, was he a recreational cocaine user? Because, people are, but absolutely nothing. No. Again, makes no sense, does it?
So avid anti-drugs. It's unbelievable. It was just, you could have literally picked me up off the floor. I was devastated. And to the point that even my family liaison officer and the investigating officer were going along the lines of, could he have been spiked? Could he have bought a cup of coffee? Could he have bought a cup of tea that had been spiked? Because I don't think that they believed it either. And it's what do you do in those circumstances? Because you're out of control. You have no control over it whatsoever. And in my head, with the press coverage that his accident got, and also more importantly for me, was to preserve Mike's reputation. I didn't want it going down in public record, because an inquiry is a public record that he was a cocaine user. I'd written the headline in my head that was going to appear over the press, and some people stuck on the A21 for 4.5 hours because a biker high on cocaine.
Oh my God. This is awful. Oh my God. So Nicky, what on earth do you do? Like, how do you fight this?
I mean, I was in unknown territory. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I said, can I have the blood independently tested? And for toxicology, they take 2 vials of blood. My family liaison officer said, well, we will need to get permission from the coroner, because the blood was the property of the coroner. We don't know that there's enough blood left, we don't really know how to go about this. But she said, what we will do is put the request into the coroner and see what comes out of it. Needless to say, I spent a very sleepless night going through scenarios in my head. I spoke to some really close friends, one who's really good on Google, and he was coming up and saying, right, okay, if there's blood left, you need to get this test done, you need to get that test done. The police rang me the following morning, and it was early, it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and said he'd spoken to a chief toxicologist at King's, basically asking the question, for somebody who is a non-recreational drug user, how could a test be positive? And he came up with some other substances to test for, so stuff that's cut with cocaine, etc. Then you would see whether or not it was as a result of contamination or a reaction to some of the drugs he'd been given, because obviously he was heavily medicated during the time.
So you mean medication that he may have been given in hospital could possibly have presented as cocaine in the blood test?
That was where I was thinking. That's where my head was going.
Oh, this is your theorising.
Yeah,
okay. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, you theorise over everything,
You're clutching at straws.
You are.
Of course.
Then he rang me to say, and the toxicologist also gave details of labs that would do independent tests. He obtained, so the investigation officer also obtained authority from the coroner for me to have an independent test done, and that there was sufficient blood left. And I had to pay for that independent test. At that point in time, I had absolutely no idea how much that would cost, but whatever it cost, friends, family, relatives, etc., would have come up with the money. It was £396.
A money to find, isn't it?
It's a hell of a lot of money to find. So the police put me in contact with the lab, a new lab. I spoke to the toxicologist there, and I was saying, okay, it's on its way to you. I've got his socks. I've researched that if you're a cocaine user, it will be in your socks. I've got the socks he was wearing on the day. I've got his crash helmet still, because it can be found in hair follicles. Obviously, Mike by that time had been cremated, so I didn't have his body, so we couldn't do any further tests. I said, I've got his wallet in case he's got, he'd picked up contaminated banknotes. And he said, look, let me just run the tests first, and then we will see where we go from there. The other theory that I came up with as well is that Mike was actually code red and had a blood transfusion. Code red is where you have severe blood loss and they have to transfuse your blood. So I thought,
so contaminated blood.
Yeah, that was another theory I had. And your mind just gets carried away with you. With cocaine, there's actually two elements. When cocaine goes into the system, it metabolizes really quickly. So the actual cocaine itself goes out of your system really quickly, and it produces an enzyme, and I can never say the name of it, but it produces an enzyme which increases. So as the cocaine decreases, this enzyme increases. So
is it cocaethylene?
No, it's something or other. Anyway, the bloods were couriered from the toxicology lab up to the new lab. 10 days later, I get an email through both, and they tested both samples. So there was 2 vials of blood. They tested both of them, and both of them proved negative.
So completely negative.
Completely negative. So I was absolutely completely negative.
Yeah, I've gone speechless over here, which is unusual. So the initial tests have come back and they have said that your husband is 3 times the legal limit for cocaine. I didn't even know there was a legal limit for cocaine. Yep. And now these tests are going, and they're completely clear.
Completely clear. Needless to say, I was absolutely overjoyed. I said, right, yeah, I've done it. I've cleared Mike's name. I've protected his reputation. Spoke to the coroner.
But I'm guessing quite angry too.
Very angry. But I think the elation of actually protecting Mike's memory overweighed the anger. Spoke to the coroner, and the coroner's assistant came back to me several hours later. Actually, no, it may have been a couple of days later, and said, thank you for sharing the results, but we need to get a 3rd test done.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So we're now sort of mid-August. I spoke to the...
Sorry, I'm reeling that you're just being made to go through this whilst still trying to process the loss of your husband. Yep. This just feels absolutely barbaric. It's so cruel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the coroner... So the 3rd test was down to the coroner to pay. They found a lab up in London. Mike's bloods got transported from the lab at St George's Hospital across to the lab at Imperial College Hospital. And 5 days went by. So I thought I'd just give the coroner just a ring to say, what timelines are we looking at? Because I'm still sitting on tender hooks. I haven't quite got there
Mm.
yet. Mike's, this third test could come back positive. I don't know. And he came back to me later that day. He said, oh, yeah, we've got a slight problem. They don't actually want to do the test. So my supervisor is now trying to find another lab to do the test. And this was the day before the August bank holiday. So nothing was going to happen until after the bank holiday. And then the coroner's assistant rang me back and he said, yes, we found another lab and we're going to arrange for the bloods to be biked up there or couriered up there that day. And there's a 3 to 4 week turnaround period.
Jesus Christ. So what happened when these tests came back? Please tell me they were negative. I can't wait any longer to hear the answer on this one.
Yep, both were negative.
Thank goodness for that. I was about to have some sort of embroidery myself over here.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and this is now September, presumably, that you get this final answer. And he has died in the May, so May, June, July. That's 4 months. 4 months that you've been waiting for an answer, and 4 months that you have not known whether your husband's reputation is going to be dragged through the mud. And I think you are so right. I think the press, the less ethical of the press would have had an absolute field day with this.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been incredibly traumatic for you. And I'm so glad that you had the tenacity and the strength to question these results, and that you knew that, you were together for 32 years, you knew him. But grief passed, and sometimes in grief you haven't got the wherewithal to do this. So thank goodness he had you in his corner, even though he'd gone.
Yeah. After that came through, the inquest was delayed because of it. The inquest should have been taking place in October. That was then delayed to November. And the investigating officer, he shared his police report with me on the day of the inquest to say there is no mention in there whatsoever of drugs. And he really wanted to reassure me that. And then I thought, this isn't fair. I should never have been put through that. I should never have been put in the situation that I doubted that I knew the person I'd lived with for 32 years and been with for 32 years. And nobody will ever take away that momentary second of doubt that I had in my mind is I didn't know the person I was with. And I thought, it's not fair. And there'll be other families. Who else have they got it wrong for?
My first was to Lulu, because her husband had no history of drug use and yet was found with heroin in his system. And my first, as you're talking, my thoughts are going to her. I'm desperate to get her take on this. Actually, I will be speaking to her after I've spoken to you. What happened though? What happens next? Because how did this mistake happen? How was this allowed to happen? And was there any consequence?
I wanted to find out what had happened and why it had gone so wrong. And I put an official complaint into the coroner, who passed my complaint across to the lab that had undertaken the toxicology report, and had done the test. They sent me a letter explaining that the Mike sample had been contaminated during the cleaning process. I went back with numerous different queries, and I had been doing my research. The levels of the cocaine and its metabolic were of exactly the same level. They were 0.3. Scientifically, that can never happen. And yet the chief toxicologist at the lab had signed that report off.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And this is this is life altering stuff, because I know that Mike isn't here anymore, but he's still, you don't want his reputation in tatters, and also the impact that this would have had on you. You could have been hounded.
Yeah.
It could have been very scary. It was very scary, but it could have been far scarier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was anybody held accountable for this?
I did get a follow-up, because the coroner did say that at the end of the day, he would write to me with the results of his investigations into the complaint. The lab was actually shut down for a 2-week period whilst their processes and procedures were reviewed. And they also entered a regime of sporadic double testing. So samples would go off to a different lab to be tested just to make sure that the results were the same. In my mind, you don't do that for just one person or one set of wrong results.
So you think there's been more?
I will never know, but you wouldn't shut a lab down for 2 weeks just because one set of results were wrong, in my mind. And that's just my hypothesis. But
and I guess you're right. This would be that this has happened once. It must have happened more times, which is absolutely terrifying. And, what lives have been ruined over this sort of thing?
The ironic thing is that, on the day that my family liaison officer sat here and said, sometimes we get surprises with the toxicology report. She said, I've sat in front of families where they said, I didn't know little Johnny was a drug taker, but he could have been. And little did I know at that point in time that I was going to go through such a journey.
It's weird, isn't it? The sort of conversations that we have. I've spoken about standing in the playground and saying, oh, yeah, Ben dropped dead tomorrow. I wouldn't know who paid the electric kind of thing. And he was already dead. And the way things that fairly innocuous conversations that you think you're having then have such a impact onto your story.
They do. They really do. Yeah.
So you must have been left with a lot of, obviously, trauma, shock, and I believe you were formally diagnosed with PTSD, weren't you, following this?
Yeah.
It often takes quite a long time to take this though, doesn't it? And especially to get a diagnosis. And I think seeking out help for your own recovery is often takes a little while. And just really interested to know how you've recovered or beginning to recover from such a catastrophic event, because I'm particularly interested when I speak to people in how they've dragged themselves out of this pit and managed to build a life again. So if you wouldn't mind just tell me a little bit about how you've managed to do that.
So, I probably wasn't in the best situation. That first Christmas, so Christmas 2019, I had made the decision I didn't want to be that person in the corner that everybody was checking, are they okay? And the circumstances of Mike leaving me made me realise life is far too short. My whole life changed in a split second. So all those things that are on the bucket list, thought, right, I'm going to do them. And I was drawn to Bali for some reason. And I also have always wanted to scuba dive.
I can see the others can't see me, but I'm sitting here with my head in my hands, kind of going, no. But none of my business. None of my business. You can't not live life, and people die in all sorts of ways. So I'm trying not to project my own fears onto you through the screen.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I learned to scuba dive, and I was actually doing my open water lessons at the time that I was going through all the stuff with Mike and the cocaine and everything else. I think my first 2-day course was booked 2 days after I'd heard the news. Needless to say, I was an absolute wreck. This confident person who had no fear of water struggled to jump in the water, but I persevered. I think I've got sort of this inner drive in me that just says, you can do this, you can do this.
Of steel, my dear, is what that is. That's a core of steel.
Yeah. Anyway, long and short of it is Christmas Day 2019, I was in Bali and I qualified as an open water diver. I got back from Bali and I felt so spiritually relaxed. Bali is an amazing place
to go. Probably won't do the scuba diving, but I am desperate to go.
Yes, yeah, definitely worth it. And I had an amazing time, and some really strange things happened while I was out there. There was a gala Christmas dinner, and I'd seen this girl walk into this hotel, and it was a small hotel at the same time as I did, about 1 o'clock in the morning, Christmas morning. Long flight from the UK. And the following day, I was sitting by the pool, and I noticed she was sitting on her own in the restaurant for lunch. So I thought I'd just go up and say, do you mind some company? You're on your own. And yeah, we became good friends. The hotel noticed it. They put us, said, if you're doing the gala dinner, do you want to sit on the same table? So I wasn't sitting on my own, which was absolutely amazing. And they had a live country and western band playing. The only non-country and western song that they played was Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, which was the track that I had played at Mike's funeral. Yeah, you couldn't write it. You really couldn't write it. And a tropical thunderstorm going on at the same time.
Oh, that's given me all the goosebumps, that has.
Yeah. And then on my last day of diving, I had a dragonfly land on my ankle and not leave. So I came back from Bali in a really, really good place, straight into COVID.
I was going to say straight into lockdown.
Yeah.
All your friends in lockdown with nobody able to be with you. This is a common theme I'm hearing, and it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But know how important all of these dates and anniversaries are, and to not be able to be have arms wrapped around you and to be loved through it is just, it's more pain, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I have my neighbours. I mean, God bless my neighbours. They are absolutely amazing. You know, knocking on my front door and putting a birthday cake on my step. And standing behind the wall and singing happy birthday to me. You know, these are memories that I will always remember. You know, to be able to bubble with somebody was such a relief. It really was. And, you know, going through all those firsts, but I'd noticed that I was switching the news off because the news was relating and referring to incubators and critical care. I noticed I was becoming jumpy and that I would physically jump out my skin when the dogs barked or when my phone rang.
Yeah.
And I just put it down to, my head's not right, but I can get over this. I can dig through it. And it was a year later that I was sitting in front of my work computer and I actually didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't remember what I just typed. It was all of that. And I thought, actually, I need help. And I was very fortunate that through work, we've got a good EAP program. And I spoke to sort of the Be Supported line. And they said, yes, we're going to refer you to a psychologist. And we're authorising 16 treatments straight off. So
That's got very work, isn't it? Because this stuff is extremely expensive, isn't it?
Extremely expensive. So within 2 weeks, I got an appointment with a psychologist and he diagnosed me then with PTSD. And then I went through...
Right?
Yeah, I then went through EMDR therapy, which in itself, it's worked and it's given me techniques to cope with when you do relapse and you do get a trigger, but it was harrowing going through it because you have to relive those memories.
I think, to be honest with you, I think this is why I haven't done it. I think because almost everybody I speak to who's had experienced a traumatic loss or experience and then has had this therapy, this EMDR, I don't think I know anybody that hasn't said it's amazing and it's life-changing and transformative. But I think the reason I'm a bit scared of it is because I know that it's going to be very painful. But I think this is the year I'm going to buckle up and book myself some.
That's it. And, you know, I'd noticed that, you know, for 2 years I hadn't cried. I didn't have emotion. My mind was protecting me still. My mind was blocking everything out. For 4 years, I have not felt hunger. I want to feel hungry again. I've lost the best part of 20 kilograms since I've lost Mike. And I can't feel hunger. I just don't get that hunger feel. And I'm determined to crack it. I am. I have got this determination in me to crack it. Because it's not, Mike wouldn't want me to live in the past. He would want me to live life to the full. And I was talking to a very close friend and we went out for the day several weeks ago, end of February, I think it was. And she's an acupuncturist. And she's, you know, we talk on quite a regular basis. But she said, I want to try trauma acupuncture on you.
Consider this, yes. Tell me more about.
Yeah, I had never heard of it. So went up there a couple of weekends ago. I was her last client of the day. Then we were sitting down having wine and a meal. And she said, I'm going to do the dragon therapy on you. It's 7 dragons. And, you know, 2 needles in your head and then down your spine and down to your feet. And she said, you know, I want you to feed back. She said, I've only done this once before. And she said, during that, the previous treatment, the guy she was treating had a traumatic experience when he was a child with a dog. And throughout the treatment, there was a dog barking, constantly barking. And she said, you know, I don't know if you felt anything, you know, or, you know, if there was anything significant that when I was doing the treatment with you. And she opened her treatment room door and the heavens opened. Now, Mike was a mechanic. He had a wicked sense of humour. And there was a song, Rainy Day in Georgia, that used to play when he was in the workshop, and his mate Stuart, remembered it well, because Mike would never sing Rainy Day in Georgia. He would always say Pissing Down in Tooting, because he used to work in Motorsport. And I just turned around and I said, it's Pissing Down in Tooting. And, Stuart, and I suppose I had the last laugh with Mike as well, because after he died, I just couldn't put him in a black hearse. No matter what happened, I couldn't put him in a black hearse. And my mate Stuart, he runs a classic American car company. Sorry, I'm jumping around here a bit. And they actually had Ecto, which is the Ghostbuster car.
Stop it!
And I sent him a text message a couple of days after Mike had passed and said, you may think I've completely lost my marbles, but have you still got Ecto? And will a coffin fit in the back? He went, yes, and I'd be honoured.
I didn't expect to laugh in this interview. That's wonderful.
It is. But the beauty of it is, because it's a 1950s American classic, it had a bench seat in the back. So I actually got to travel in the back of the hearse with Mike on his final journey, which was something that was so special. But Stuart had he had his iPad there, and he was playing Rainy Day in Georgia as we were going from home to the crematorium. So, it was just, yeah.
It was really unique and special, and very symbolic of the man that he sounds to have been.
Yeah, absolutely. But, 3 weeks later, and I've only really just noticed it in the last 3 or 4 days, my head feels lighter, my shoulders feel lighter.
And this is post-acupuncture?
Post-acupuncture, yeah.
Mm. I'm a big advocate of and a big lover of acupuncture. I suffer with my back a little bit, but I've never thought to approach the trauma work. And I am going to speak to my acupuncturist about this, because I know that I carry a huge amount of sort of stress in my body. We all do, don't we? And let's be honest, I'll have a go at anything, really. I'm like the weird guinea pig. Give me an idea, I'll go and have a go at it.
That's it. But it's we're in a situation. We never chose to be in this situation.
There's no manual, is there? To guess a bit.
There's no manual. There's no guidebook. Everybody's grief is unique.
It is, and that's actually what I hear in a lot of, because we're doing these stories, is that grief is unique. And I really like the way I get to hear a little bit about the person who's died, but also I get to hear a lot about the person who's still here. And one thing I particularly like is hearing about funerals. I know that sounds like a really weird thing to say, but I like to hear how people have interjected little bits of the person they've lost personality into them, and hearing about the Ghostbuster car. It's really made me swell, and I hope you've got a picture somewhere that we can share.
I've actually got a video, because what I didn't expect, I expected to go in the hearse or in the car, and then we got to the crematorium, and you sit up the front until funeral director goes down and makes sure everything's ready. And then Stuart and his brother turned around to me and said, would you mind if we played the music going down? And I just went, no. I don't even know what I was agreeing to. So his final journey to the crematorium doors was to the Ghostbuster music as well.
Sorry, that's brilliant. Oh,
a friend of mine recorded it, and you can actually see sort of the lead mourner from the funeral directors almost walking down in time to the Ghostbuster music.
I bet you can't help it.
No. And it's given me a really happy memory of what would have been, or is a really sad day.
I'm really pleased that you got that. I had a few nice moments at Ben's memorial. Oh, so Nicky, I mean, you are a remarkable human being. You really are. And I think that Mike was very lucky to have you, and very lucky to have you in his corner. Less lucky about the dying, but, we wouldn't be speaking if that hadn't happened. So could you tell me a little bit about what your life looks like now, where you are and where you're hoping to be?
So I suppose from my own life perspective, I have adopted the default of keep busy, which isn't healthy, and I know it isn't. But then I've also tried to, alongside keeping busy, is actually rebuild my life and thinking outside the box. I know sitting indoors on my own would do me no good at all. Everybody was sent home to work from home during the pandemic, and I'm still working from home. So, you yes, we build connections, but you haven't got that necessary day-to-day contact with people. And I think, volunteering is a really good way of getting you out of the house. But I didn't want to do normal sort of volunteering. That's not me. Mike and I met through motor racing many years ago. We both used to race.
It's another little thing I'm learning about you. What did you cars or motorbikes?
Cars. I was ladies' national champion in 1991 in a
Oh,
Mini.
you left that right till the end to slip that little nugget in, didn't you?
Yeah. But what I noticed is that friends that we had both met through the racing, and we probably hadn't seen each other for best part of 25 years, are the ones who've really stuck by me during this last 4 years. And it's that motorsport family. So I thought, right, okay, let me see what I can do. And 18 months ago now, I did a taster day at Brian's Hatch to become a member of the Orange Army. And I now regularly on a weekend, you'll see me on the banks of a racetrack marshalling. I actually happen to get several TV appearances at the touring cars at Brands last year as well. And our mutual friend Andy, I can remember the first time I was attending an incident with Jason Plato, and my phone was going off, and it was Andy saying, "Is this you?"
Oh, wonderful. Oh, Nicky, what a bright spark you are from a very, very dark place. And I'm always dropping the word inspiring in, but I just love the way you've taken this catastrophic event and gone, no, this isn't taking me down. And you've created a life. And as you eloquently say, you have to create a new life, because the one that you had, it doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore. And it took me 3 years to actually realise that what was our home, and it's where I still live, is no longer a home. Yeah. That whole heart has been ripped out. I'm very fortunate is that I live in a house that has a very large plot. And when we bought it, it had outline planning permission to put a 4-bedroom house on it. So Mike and I always knew it was a little gold mine, and to sell the plot to sell the house without getting that renewed would be the worst decision we've ever made. But I took the decision early last year that I needed a fresh start, somewhere new, somewhere that I could build and make my own. So I contacted an architect. I actually managed to get full planning through to build 2 4-bedroom houses on my plot. Needless to say, it sold a couple of months ago very, very quickly. And I'm just waiting now for everything to go through. And then I am taking early retirement at 58, and I'm moving 200 miles away up into the Midlands and really making a fresh start.
Bloody good on you. You go and you grab the rest of your life with both hands, and you live the life that you both should have had.
That's it. And, my advice to anybody is, if you don't know how to do something, because we work as a partnership, couples now work as partnerships. They say the pink and the blue jobs, but I always do the blue jobs anyway. And I always did. But, yeah, but it's that, if you're not sure how to do it, look on YouTube. I've learned so much from YouTube.
I had to learn how to collapse my pram in the school playground, because I'd got it out of the car and they couldn't get it back in again. But yes, it's what kids do. They YouTube everything. Why not join them?
Yeah, but it's having that mentality and that drive to say, this is not going to get me down. And I miss Mike every single bloody day. And I wish that I could turn the clock back, but I've been dealt a hand and I've got to make the most of it. And I think somewhere he's looking down on me with pride.
I never bet the man, but I would very much expect so, because I don't think anybody could fail proud of you and what you've done. So thank you ever so much, Nicky, for joining me today. You've been a remarkable and incredibly engaging guest, and I always say I've enjoyed talking to you, which sounds very strange considering the topic of conversation, but I have enjoyed talking to you, and I think our listeners will very much enjoy listening to this. So thank you for being brave enough to come on and share your story, because I do know how difficult this is, and I do know that afterwards you will probably feel a little bit shaky and unsettled. So go make yourself a really sweet cup of tea and be very kind to yourself.
It's been a pleasure, absolutely.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody. I will be back with you on Friday to talk about Nicky's episode.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening today. We'll be back with you soon for more from the front line of loss.
But for now, as you were.